Monday Night Rugby on Off the Ball
with Eir Sport. Watch live Pro 14 action on Eir Sport this season. Visit eirsport.ie.
Busy weekend in the Guinness Pro 14 and the Rugby Championship and the Premiership as well. Joining me in studio tonight, we have Rory O'Connor, rugby correspondent with the Irish Independent. How are you doing, Rory?
Good, Neil. How are you?
And on the line as well, Eddie O'Sullivan. Evening, Eddie.
Evening, Neil.
How are you doing, guys? Well, I just want to start really with what is probably, I suppose, a pretty regular occurrence now in the game. The issue of head injuries and tackles to the head. Yesterday, Wasps beat the Leicester Tigers in the Premiership, and the talking point is a red card just before half-time for Tom Taylor, the Wasps hooker. Now, the reaction after the match of Leicester Tigers interim head coach Jordan Murphy is what's gathered a lot of attention in the last day. But before we talk about the incident, Rory, here's what Murphy had to say to BT Sport about the incident straight afterwards.
Jordan, so much to enjoy about that game, but one thing flashes out from that game, and I'm going to ask you now, the red card for Will Spencer. What's your view on it?
Oh, it's a really tough one, isn't it? Will's 6'10", and he's tackling a bloke who's 5'10", and the guy's actually pulling out of it and falling over as well, so his height has dropped. It's a really tough one. At the time, I thought he might have got a yellow. I thought red was really disappointing from my point of view.
The referee in Tempest was very clear in his decision making. He talked everyone straight through it, and as far as the letter of the law is concerned, it would suggest that was a red card. So we're potentially going to see that more and more. Your views as a man preparing a team, preparing the big guys to go out there and do a bit of damage, does that change how you're going to be coaching and what the message is to the players? Oh,
it's really difficult. You know, obviously you get a bloke who's that tall, and it's very difficult for him to go forward and be flexible and bend over. So I'm going to try and pick some players who are under 5 foot, and it's going to make it very difficult to referee that, to be quite honest, because you're not really going to be able to tackle anyone, are you? I think the game's gone a little bit too PC, a little bit too that for me is crazy. It's rugby. You know, Tommy Taylor was fine. Di Young stood beside me. He seemed okay with it. There was no HIA. There was no real danger to the player. It was a really good shot on a player who probably wasn't, and you know, it's killed the game really.
Eddie, I might start with you on this one. Coming from a head coach's perspective, it's just straight after the match. You've just lost. You've had a player red carded. Do you understand maybe the frustration of what Jordy Murphy is saying? I know that the actual specific language is what a lot of people are taking exception with here. Things like a really good shot, the game's gone too PC, we need to start picking players under 5 foot. Where are you on this issue? Is what Jordan Murphy was saying probably just a bit over the line, or does he have a point?
I understand the frustration with the tackle law, because I think that there's the tackle player has no onus on him to make himself safe. He can duck or he can dive, and if you miscalculate and hit him, then you pay the penalty. Having said that, that's the law, and I understand why it's there, and there are going to be hard cases, but you can't go in hard cases because hard cases make bad law. So I think the law is right where it is, although there will be frustrations at times. I still don't agree with Jordan Murphy. I think I watched it. I thought it was a red card. End of story. There was no humming and hawing. He went in high. I don't think the player ducked. And it's a miracle the guy got up. I thought when I saw it, I thought this guy isn't getting up, but he really must be a tough guy. But like to try and say we're getting too PC, I think we're trying to make the game safer. And at times there will be occasions when following the letter of the law seems harsh, but that's the way laws work. We can't have it say, well, he got up and ran away where he wasn't hurt. We can't wait until someone gets hurt for it to be a red card. So there's a lot of illogicality in what Jordan is coming out with there. I don't think it helps the game or helps him. And I don't understand to do with PC. It's to do with protecting players in a game that's becoming, I suppose, more violent in some ways. It's the level of contact is off the charts. The ball's in play a lot longer. So I think Jordan might want to think twice about what he came out with there, you know, and this is on the back of probably a kerfuffle a couple of weeks ago about a player, you know, retiring with a concussion from Leicester. So, you know, he may need to rethink his logic around this whole area, because it's a serious part of the game. We're trying to keep the game competitive, but we're also trying to keep it safe. And I think he crossed the line there, to be honest. I can understand his frustration. Nobody wants to lose a player. But what I saw, the referee followed the letter of the law, and we've got to do that, even if there are hard cases. But I don't even think that was a hard case, to be honest. It was a red card.
Rory, Eddie touched on it there as well. the fact that yourself and Eddie were on last week on Monday Night Rugby talking about Dominic Ryan, a Leicester Tigers player who had just retired because of complications from concussion. Is that probably what kind of stings a bit more with these comments and makes it just feel a little bit more disrespectful?
Yeah, I don't know if disrespectful is the word. I just think it's disappointing that a player or a coach who's so recently retired, who has probably seen a lot of his former teammates go through the issues and the charges in Dominic Ryan's case, and yet still has what seems like quite a backward view on one of the most important issues the game faces. I understand that Jordan Murphy is hugely disappointed, and Eddie has far greater experience of this than I do, but facing the cameras and the immediacy of a narrow loss against your rivals is a very, very difficult thing to do, and it's one of the challenges that he probably wouldn't have had to face as an assistant that he's now facing as the head coach. And he had, sometimes you bite your tongue, maybe, and it would be disappointing if he felt this way behind the scenes. Maybe it's better that we know the coaches are feeling this way. But as Eddie said, it was a straight red card. Even under the old laws, he would have been, Spencer would have done well to get away with the tackle that he'd put in on. Just because he's 6'10" doesn't give him a licence to go flying around at people's heads. Devon Toner doesn't get yellow carded or red carded very often. He has adapted his tackle technique. It's one of the reasons it took him till 26 or 27 to get into the Leinster and Irish teams, was because he had to adapt his body to the game, because it's so difficult for a man of his size. So that's not a free rein or a carte blanche to go around hurling yourself at head height. You have to, if you're going to pick this guy, he has to be able to tackle. He has to be able to get low. That's just one of the fundamentals of the game. And just because he's much taught, it's a game for all sizes. So that's just not an excuse. So look, it's very disappointing. It's worrying that a professional coach, one of the new guard, such a recently retired player, thinks that way. I do give him, I don't know if it's a pass, but I do understand that he's very emotional in the aftermath of a game. But I would imagine, I think he needs to look at it. I think he needs to think about, the way the game is going. The fact that we're here talking about it again. If it had been a red card and he'd accepted it, people would have said, look, that's the way the game should be handling this thing. I do think there may be a scope for something in between a yellow and a red for these infringements. I don't think, for maybe a reckless rather than an intentional, a punch or an eye gouge or something like that. I'm not sure, but that was a really good game that was ruined. It was the end of the first half, I think, and I was watching it. It was a cracker of a match in front of a big crowd, and suddenly it's completely imbalanced. Over something that was probably poor technique. He did go high and fast, so you could argue the case, but maybe it's something like a black card in the GA where you get to replace the player, or a 20-minute sin bin or something you suggested before we come on air. I'm not sure, but it is a big punishment. But away from that, it's the attitudes that you just hope are going to change.
Yeah, and Eddie, Rory touched on it there. The issue of intent in all of this, and Freddie Burns of Bath in England after the match tweeted last night, not blaming referees, and I know it's being done to protect us players, but can we go back to red cards only being issued for deliberate acts of bad foul play, not unfortunate incidents that happen as a result of playing a contact sport? It's ruining the game. Is there a way to move here that you actually still can punish tackles like that with, like Rory suggested there, like the idea of a black card in Gaelic games, a forced substitution, or maybe an even longer sin binning?
Yeah, I think Rory's point is an excellent point. I think, yes, the red card for an unintentional event like that, where, let's give the player the benefit of the doubt. I don't think he made any adjustment. I think it went and lit him up. Mm-hmm. But let's step away from this incident, because arguing on nails on the head of a pin kind of thing. But let's say, for example, a player does break the law in, say, a high tackle situation, and there is no intent. It's just one of those things that happens. And this is the thing. This is the part of me that I always kind of try and see. The other side of the argument is that the way the law stands at the moment, there is no obligation on the player being tackled to protect himself. In fact, we're kind of moving in the direction which would worry me, that if I'm devious enough as a ball carrier and I want to milk a penalty, I'll just have to duck at the last minute when I'm being tackled, and I can probably get something out of it. It could be a penalty, could be a yellow card, could be a red card. And the player making a tackle made it with the best intentions, with no malice, and he gets heavily punished. So I think Rory's suggestion is a very good one. Like, we do have to look at that. If there's an accidental collision, yes, it can be outside the law, but the punishment has to fit the crime. And at the moment, it's probably the same crime as for me going over intentionally lighting somebody up with a straight arm tackle as me making a mistake. And I think there is latitude there for reviewing that. And I think, funny, the black card thing that Rory mentioned there makes sense in the sense that you don't go down to 14 men because it does ruin the game, and because of an accident like that. And I think there is room for that. Maybe, the GA are ahead of the curve here on this. Well, they took up the yellow and red card after rugby, which did after soccer. Now they've the black card, which probably in some ways there's a lot of logic to it. So I would agree. I think it's a great suggestion by Rory.
And if we're looking, though, I suppose the immediate clampdown, I mean, this is something that they want to impact way down the line, 20, 30 years down the line for rugby. But for the short term, Rory, you probably do have to be very, very strict on it. You probably have to make the harsh calls and give out the red cards for accidents, in the hope that players change the way they approach tackles, coaches change the way they coach, and we see less and less of it. And then further down the line, when it's become less of a problem in the game, that you can treat it a little bit fairly and kind of have a more lenient view, and maybe bring in yellow cards or black cards or things like that.
Well, that's the idea, and I think you would hope that Leicester now this week have gone away from this, and Will Spencer and his teammates will be adapting their tackle tech, and will know that you have to go lower. Anyone who's played the game knows that it's very difficult to get your tackle on the money. There's so many things go into it every time. I do think, like even in France, we're seeing a lot more. Rabah Slimani was sim in this week for a forearm smash. Sergio Parise was red carded for one at the start of the season, so that's coming in as well. That the ball carrier isn't leading with their arm. That players will have to adapt to that as well, because if that's coming in there, you'd imagine it's going to come in all over the place. We saw it with Stockdale during the summer. Teams will have to adapt. As Eddie said, I'm sure some coaches are coaching their players to dip into contact as well, because that's, all laws have unintended consequences. But there is, these adaptations are evidence-based. They are done for the protection of the players, even though they can lead to the ruining of the game and a big fallout like we've seen. So there's always kind of teething problems, and it seems like we're in a non-stop teething problem right now with these issues, because you've players going for the high ball. It's also to bring in the reduction of injuries. It's all for the same purpose. It's just when you've been playing the game all your life and you're trying to adapt to these things, it can be quite a struggle, and someone like Jordan Murphy is obviously struggling with the idea of it behind it. Yeah,
I'm sure we'll get around to this even further throughout the year. It's obviously a hot topic, and with the frequency of the way it's occurring, it's not going to go away anytime soon. Just a reminder, we're here with thanks to Eir Sport on Off the Ball, the home of rugby in Ireland. We're going to move now to the Rugby Championship and the Week 4 results from the weekend. Two absolutely cracking games, Rory. First of all, on Saturday morning, we had South Africa beating New Zealand, favourite South Africa, as Steve Hansen tried to put it earlier in the week, just getting by New Zealand, and then Argentina beating Australia. But that first game, South Africa, New Zealand on Saturday morning, it's the last minute. New Zealand camped on the line. They are 2 points behind, and you are just screaming at the TV, take a drop goal.
And apparently the word came on from the coaching box to the players that drop goal was the option. And TJ Perinara, the scrum half, has said they were presented with the picture of a 4-on-2 on the outside, and they reckon there's more moving parts in a drop goal than there is in a 4-on-2. They backed themselves, and it didn't come off. There was a knock-on. I think Ireland would have gone for a drop goal. I think most teams would have gone for a drop goal. I think most teams would have nailed a drop goal, and it's probably indicative of the fact that New Zealand and even New Zealand Super Rugby franchises don't find themselves in that situation very often. And I think it's probably something that they may look back on in 12 months' time and say, that they'll learn from. A bit like the Lions test last year. It's not a bad time to lose. They're probably going to win the Rugby Championship anyway. Losing at home maybe it's not a bad time to get a kick in the teeth for this group of young players. But they have lost more games now in this World Cup cycle than they did in the last. They're up to 4. They are not as good. There's a lot of talk about this being their best team ever. I don't think it's as good as the team that was there 4 years ago. I think the players that have retired, they've replaced them with very talented players, but there's nowhere near the same level of experience and leadership in there that McCaw and Carter, Nonu and all these players brought to the table. They're still the best team in the world, but I do think they're a little bit more vulnerable. When it's that black jersey, it's not a huge amount of vulnerability, but I think if a team brings their best to the table, if one of the best teams in the world brings their best to the table, I think New Zealand can be beaten. You probably need Beauden Barrett to miss a few kicks, but he's more than capable of doing that. He lost them in the Lions series, missing kicks last year, and he's lost them a test at home in the same venue in Wellington. So just little chinks to the World Cup rivals that if you get it right on the day against them and a few things go against them, you do have a shot. I think 9 times out of 10 they win that game. The stats are incredibly in their favour. They butchered a load of chances. They handed South Africa a couple of tries, but it's a bit of oxygen in the lungs for everyone else, and maybe a bit worryingly for Ireland, a lot of oxygen in South Africa's lungs, given they're probably going to be Ireland's World Cup quarter-final opponents in a year's time.
Yeah, that was something, Eddie, I was actually getting to next as well. watching it on, you couldn't help but think that, barring a complete disaster at the World Cup for Ireland next year, we were watching one of Ireland's World Cup quarter-final opponents, and both of them were pretty good.
Yeah, I would agree with Rory that on the New Zealand side of things, that this is the kick in the pants they need every now and again. They I think once they got 10 points up or 12 points up, they got complacent a bit. They tried things they wouldn't normally try. So I think that's not good news for everybody, because they do learn from their mistakes. South Africa, it's a weird one. I think South Africa were very lucky to win on the weekend, and you can't have one side there without the other. Like New Zealand missed, they missed 4 conversions, that's 8 points, and then they butchered a number of chances, and they gave up 17 stupid points. An intercept, a quick tap that was a quick line that led to a quick line out, and then there also was the penalty just for half time that they gave away to South Africa. So that, if they played South Africa tomorrow, I can't imagine they'd lose. And I think I'm still not sure what South Africa are, because I thought last week was rather bizarre with Rassie Erasmus talking about potentially losing his job. I thought it was rather bizarre.
Was that just a bit of potential ball hopping? Something, a bit of cuteness he might have picked up in Munster.
Like that, it's not a joke. What's the message he's trying to give? Is he trying to give a message to supporters? He's trying to give a message to the South African Union, or he's trying to give a message to players? And just because they rode their luck on Saturday morning and won in Wellington does not mean that every problem that South Africa had a week ago has now just evaporated. South Africa are nowhere near where they want to be. Their game is not developed, by the way, really that much. I thought some of the one thing I say about New Zealand that makes them vulnerable about that, and that's the defence is not particularly good. They have a very flexible defence system, and they allow players to make lots of reads, and they made a lot of bad reads on the weekend as well against South Africa. The 2 tries South Africa got that constructed were just poor defence by New Zealand. So I don't think South Africa's problems have just evaporated because they got lucky in Wellington. I don't want to take away from that. Any day you beat the All Blacks, you do need a bit of luck, and it'd be the same for any other team in the world. So I'm not trying to rain on their parade, but I don't think all their problems are solved. How do you go from thinking of you might lose your job this week as the head coach and not go to the World Cup, that now everything's fine again? So I just think South Africa's still a bit all over the place. I think New Zealand will have learned from this. They got caught. They had 79% possession, or 79% territory and 75% possession. They scored 6 tries, and they still didn't win the game. So it's hard to believe. South Africa missed 39 tackles. How in God's name did they win that game, South Africa? So there's lots of oddities there that I think wouldn't happen again to the All Blacks. But I still think it's bad news that they got this kick in the backside, because they're not going to make that mistake probably again. And I don't think South Africa are out of the woods by any means. No, it might be wrong. Wait till the end of the Rugby Championship before we decide that. But I'm not convinced by just one victory over the All Blacks that solves all their problems.
Rory, 12 months down the line, do you think South Africa could be out of the woods by then? Can you see Rassie making the necessary changes for them and kind of just having them as a well-oiled machine by the time the World Cup rolls around?
Well, I think if you remember where they were in November when they came to Dublin and how disorganised they were that day, I think they will have come quite far in that 12-month period, but I think the gap between the teams was still quite big. So I do think that Ireland justified their position as the second best team in the world, and I think Rassie has South Africa on an upward curve. I'm not sure if he can get everything right that he needs to get right in that 12-month period, or in that kind of 18-month period that he had from when he took over. It's a very short window to get everything right, but he has a lot of good players who physically can take on anyone when they get it right, and I think they're a massively dangerous team. I don't think they're going to win the World Cup. I think they could shock New Zealand in that. I think they play pretty early in the tournament, so you could end up in Ireland's pool facing New Zealand in a quarter-final. It's a dangerous fixture in a fixture that Ireland have never won in their history. To be going up against one of the traditional big two is just it'll focus the minds like nothing else.
But is it better from a supporter point of view maybe to just kind of forget about it for a while, because if you get to a quarter-final, you're going to be playing one or the other. It's going to be a tough one regardless.
You're going to have to beat them to win the World Cup anyway, and that's the way Ireland are thinking. They're not thinking about winning quarter-finals. Well, you'd hope they're not thinking about winning quarter-finals, even though it's the glass ceiling that's traditionally been there. I think Ireland would embrace the challenge if they got there. They'll all talk about how they have to beat Scotland and Japan first, and they play both of them in a 4-day window, so that's going to be quite tough. So it's going to be the fixture on everyone's minds going over there in a year's time. But there's, I think South Africa are back at home for their next 2 games, so they can finish this tournament on a high. They're not coming here in November, but they'll look to build again. Find a few new faces. Pollard is looking like the player he was 4 years ago. Which
a lot more control with Pollard at 10.
He's a better player. I mean, Jantji's put through a lovely pass for the last try that South Africa scored, but he's not the international class fly half that you need, and Pollard is. Pollard. I could see he was unlucky in that Pollard missed most of his time in charge. He was pretty much always injured. Lambie was there, and he turned to Jantji's quite a lot. So, a couple of things went against him. Rassie gets that bit of luck, he gets the players fit. Marks is up there with anyone. They've a couple of they've got the athletes. I still think there's a lot, as Eddie said, there's a long way for them to go to be right for that World Cup. But I still think they'll be very, very dangerous. And
a quick word as well, Rory, on Argentina beating Australia 23-19 in Australia. I think the main thing to talk about, Israel Folau. We saw the best and the worst of him. That try in the first half when he weaved around 4 players and got in the corner, and then butchering that try with the last play of the game.
Yeah, I only saw bits and pieces of this game, but the Folau incident, you could hardly miss it on Saturday morning. The second one, you got to give that pass. I know he's a special player who backs himself, and you sometimes admire that about him. But I'd say Michael Cheika, he didn't admire much about that. You got to do the right thing. You got to, you might be able to do that against weaker opponents, but in the international test arena, you've got to take the right option. And he puts the pressure right back on Michael Cheika once again. But Argentina showed against New Zealand last week that they're starting to come together as well. It's that time of year, that time of the cycle that everyone's starting to put things together. Whereas Australia just can't seem to buy a bit of consistency. They win one week, they lose the next at home. They've got a big fallout. Their flanker Luke Antui is going to sit out the next couple of weeks because he had a row with a fan, bereavement in the family. Just the kind of thing that no one else is going through. They've fallen to their lowest ever ranking of 7th in the world. Czech is under massive pressure, but there's no real alternatives. There's just a real sense that Australia are at a very low ebb, and but if he'd given that pass, they'd score that try. Suddenly they'd have a bit of momentum going into their final 2 games. So, Argentina play New Zealand at home next, so that'll be interesting because they caused them a lot of problems last week in Nelson.
Yeah. Well, we'll move on to the Pro 14 now, but just a reminder, if you're watching on Facebook, YouTube or Twitter, be sure to get your comments and questions in to be in with a chance of winning some great prizes this week. Across the season, we'll have a host of great prizes to give away with thanks to Heineken. This week, we have a rugby ball signed by Brian O'Driscoll, Keith Wood and other rugby legends, as well as your own case of Off the Ball branded Heineken. So if you'd like to win, get commenting and we'll announce the winner at the end of the week. Now, moving on to the Pro 14, a couple of facile wins for Leinster and Munster against Welsh sides. We'll start with Leinster, 52-10 winners against the Dragons. Johnny Sexton back in the team. Gary Ringrose, Robbie Henshaw was in there as well. Rob Kearney was making his return. And Josh van der Fleer, I think, deserves a mention. Getting back after, 8-9 months out with an ACL injury and getting on the score sheet as well. And the perfect kind of game for someone like that to come back after a long absence. I was down in Munster Friday night and just watching the Saturday's events as well. It was a training ground run, really, wasn't it? I mean, it's one of the strongest teams in Europe against one of the worst, and it showed on the scoreboard and it shows in pretty much every facet of the game. It's very hard to read anything into the weekend's results, except for the fact that those players came through unscathed and will start hitting a bit of form in the next couple of weeks. But Van der Fleer is a massive bonus from a Leinster point of view. To consider they missed him and O'Brien last season and still won all they won. It's scary to think what their back row might be with both of them available, or how is. I think Dan Levy might be back this week. How does that play into what Leo Cullen picks over the next couple of weeks? A couple of big games coming up. So not great news for Leinster's opponents, but Leinster fans have plenty to look forward to in the next couple of weeks. Eddie, as we said, it's hard enough to read too much into those wins at the weekend for Leinster and Munster, but one man for Leinster really impressed with Jamison Gibson-Park at scrum half. Now, he'll be Irish qualified in time for the World Cup. Could you see him potentially being a bolter for the World Cup squad?
Well, it depends. I mean, if he supplants Luke McGrath and the Leinster team right through the season in all the big games, he puts himself in the plan because Luke McGrath's in the plans. So, but that position there it depends if he can manage to hold out Luke McGrath out of that position. He puts himself in the frame. But I do, in fairness to him, I thought he was outstanding on the weekend. But the question is, will he get enough chances to be outstanding over the next few months to really make Joe Schmidt look up and take charge? Plus, you've got Cooney as well, who's probably the guy who's probably made the biggest statement at the start of the season. It's not out beyond the bounds of possibility, but it's a fairly long road to travel. I suppose it depends on how his season goes. If he keeps doing what he was doing last Saturday every week, then yeah, he certainly puts up his hand.
I think people are forgetting that Joe Schmidt only took two scrum halves to the 2015 World Cup. Mm-hmm. He had Ian Madigan covering as the third option in case of emergency, and Joey Carbery has played there before and has shown a few times for Munster already that he can pass off the base to the ruck. So that race for that scrum half position could be even more complex. You know, Eddie knows more than anyone, picking a World Cup squad is a delicate balance, and versatility is a very important thing. And the way he picked it last time meant that one scrum half got squeezed out. So it's quite a scramble already for November, never mind next year. So I think Gibson Park is a long way to go to try and get ahead of the players that he's up against.
Yeah, it was another sobering enough result for the Dragons. Is it getting towards crunch time now for Bernard Jackman after a very difficult season last year? There was, a big clearance, a big recruitment drive over the summer. They've got some big name players and the likes of Ross Moriarty, and to see Ross Moriarty at the weekend getting sin bin for something as stupid as just shouldering Johnny Sexton in the back really wasn't dangerous in the slightest, but a stonewall yellow card for just probably the sheer stupidity and needlessness of it. It's not what you sign your marquee Wales internationals and Lions for, is it? You're looking for them to provide the example to your younger players. It was a very difficult first season, but Bernard Jackman the whole way through was already talking about this year and the fact that he was going to clear house and get a couple of experienced players in, and he got a bit of backing from the WRU. He managed to sign a couple of really good players. Moriarty's a very good player. You'd hope that he'll get over that and be an asset for them over the course of the season. Hibbard is an experienced campaigner who's a couple of years in the Premiership behind them now as well. I don't think they're ever going to be winning in the RDS. I don't think that's a realistic game to judge them on. I think they're playing Zebra this week, so he needs to be beating the teams around them. He needs those ones to go his way, and he needs to kind of get to the top of that little table of those teams. The problem he has is the Italians are having a really good season so far. Now the South Africans are really poor. It looks like the Cheetahs have gone really, really far backwards. He's already beaten the Kings, but then they let the Kings in that game. They didn't put them away. So it's a crunchier form, because year two for any coach, you want to see progress. You're not necessarily like the Dragons. I'm not sure are ever going to be able to do what Connacht did in 2016. That was a bit of a freak as it is. But yeah, he'll have to show some sort of progression, because no set of fans is going to accept being bottom of the league every year. I'm sure they don't in Zebra or any of the teams that have struggled over the last couple of years. So there is a bit of pressure on him, and the Welsh media have put pressure on him, and the fans have done so as well. He's done a good job of engaging with the community and all that sort of over there. But at the end of the day, you do have to start getting wins. Eddie, Munster bounced back in down in Cork on Friday night, beating the Ospreys 49-13. Joey Carbery, he got his first Munster start and he got his first Munster try as well, and I think it was pretty much what every Munster fan wanted to see. The type of try it was as well, just breaking onto a ball like that, onto a bit of loose possession, and jinking around a couple of defenders, running in under the posts.
Yeah, I was down at that game. There was a great crowd there actually, and there was huge goodwill towards Carbery. Like, they wanted it to go well for him, so he kind of lit the place up when he got at the end of that. But it was great for Carbery. It was great for Munster to bounce back from the previous week. But I mean, they're still a bit in the dark after to learn anything out of it. I think Alan Clark, he might have admitted it too much, but he had to at least take stock of the fact that he got it really badly wrong to rock up against Munster with the team he brought. I mean, he left all his key internationals at home. He ran a very young team. Munster, he should have known Munster were going to respond to losing the week before, and he waltzed into town. I don't think he thought he'd lose by 50. I think he thought he might stay competitive and maybe nick a losing bonus point or something, but it was just carnage from the get-go. Like, they were just beating out the gate. They couldn't handle Munster on any front, and it was a training run for Munster. I mean, Van Gran was delighted after and relieved, as any coach is when you score 49 points. But in terms of finding out what he needs to know about where he is, I don't think they really know yet. I mean, the next time they have a big game, everyone will look back to the game in Glasgow as the benchmark, whether they've moved on from that. Certainly last Friday night in Cork it's not good for a tournament. Plus the fact, I think Alan Clark hasn't done himself any favours, because no matter what way you dice it, losing 49 points of a shellacking means that that's a scare on the squad. That they have to get into training this week and head into another game next week. And I don't think the Ospreys are a bad team, but I think Clark has to learn that events like that aren't good for anybody. It wasn't any good for Munster either. So it was a pity that it was just a one-sided affair. It was great for the home crowd, all the tries, everyone was on their feet. Carbery played very well. All the guys who were supposed to have played well, but it was really a non-event in terms of Munster knowing where they are going forward.
And just before we go, a quick word, guys, on Connacht and Ulster. Ulster 3 wins out of 3. They're going up against the Cheetahs this weekend, who, as you said, Rory, have had an absolutely awful start. You probably would expect 4 wins out of 4 for Ulster. The big positive so far for them this season, John Cooney just taking up where he left off last year, and Marcel Coetzee, pretty much a new signing. And you'd have to be delighted for him, given the 2 years he's had as well.
Oh, absolutely, yes. Well, we spoke to him towards the end of last season. He was back training, and he was already back last season talking about this season and coming back. And there was a couple of there was murmurs the whole time that he was finished. The way these things are when a player's out for that long, when he has a couple of aborted comebacks. When he comes back for a couple of weeks and then has to get injured as well. So it's great to see a player of that calibre. He's not at his peak yet. He's obviously still got a way to go, but he adds so much to that Munster ball carrying game. I mean, there is a perception out there that Ulster probably aren't the toughest of packs, but when you put him into it, it just adds so much to what they have. I think Will Addison and Billy Burns are probably positives for them as well. I think they're both. I think Addison cried off late at the weekend, but he's a very talented player. I think will feature for Ireland in November. But I think the great main benefit for Ulster at the moment is that they're not playing particularly well. They're learning to play together because they're such a new team, but they're winning as they do it. So they're coming in, I think by next week they should have 4 wins from 4 going into the Irish derbies.
Given the uncertainty of the coaching situation during the summer,
they've kind of a free shot down in Munster then after that, and then they have Connacht at home, a game that they traditionally win. So they could be going into that the European games with 5 from 6, something around. That's an unbelievable start. But they won't be fooled by the fact that they didn't even get a bonus point. Then the Kings on Sunday they were pretty hit and miss. They're spluttering a little bit to get their game going, but they're winning. So it's not a bad habit to get into. They need a lot of improvement, I think, before they start talking about Europe as a serious consideration. But it's not a bad place to be. To be whatever play badly and winning, but with a new team to be learning through this period while getting the results is a pretty decent place to be, I think.
Eddie, before we go as well, just a quick word on Connacht. 17-10 defeat on Friday night away to Edinburgh. There were some positives. Jack Carty has had a pretty good start to the season, and his assist for Ní Adéalokun's try was like something we've seen Danny Cipriani do over the last few weeks. Paul Boyle, though, has stood out yet again. 60 metres off 8 carries and 15 tackles on Friday night. He's just had a brilliant start, really grasped his opportunity.
Yeah, he has indeed. I suppose Connacht, they're probably at a point now where a bit where Ulster, they need to get some wins under their belt to try and just get some wind in their sails. They've one win, and that was really a game they should have won anyway. The loss to Glasgow was a real kick in the teeth because they probably had done enough to win that game, and now to lose up in Edinburgh. But Edinburgh were always going to bounce back. Edinburgh needed a win last weekend. That was always going to be a tough one, and I think. They struggled a bit with the referee. They gave away something like, I think it was 16 penalties, and Richard Corker was going crazy after that. They weren't penalised more for that. So, Connacht are just nipping along nicely. They're not playing badly or anything like that. They're just getting the wrong side of results. And I think at some point they need to probably put a couple of results together. And it's going to be tough enough because, after next week, they have to go into, as Rory says, the local derbies, which aren't going to be easy. But having said that, I think they do need probably another win under their belt pretty soon to give them some breathing space, because if they were to lose again now, they start slipping down to the bottom of the table. But unfortunately, the Scarlets next one up now on Saturday, and that's in Galway. But if they could find some way of turning over Scarlets, that could really be the kind of the momentum they need. But if they were to lose the Scarlets and then they go to Ulster, and then it could be they could find themselves having not done too much wrong, in a bad spot by the European break. So it's kind of a tough time for them. You'd like to see them probably, even a bit like Ulster, it doesn't matter how they win, that they nick a few results now just to get them off the table a little bit. But we'll see. But I think, again, Tall Order next week, even it is the Scarlets at home.
Eddie, thanks for joining us tonight.
Thanks very much.
Take care. Well, just a reminder, guys, we're here with thanks to Eir Sport, the home of rugby in Ireland. Before we go, Rory, just a comment coming in, a contender for our Heineken comment of the week. The Troisonator has been in touch. He asks, any chance of Barrett being moved to 15?
Bowden.
They already have one there, don't they?
Well, they have, yeah, they do, and they have Mackenzie to come in as well. So, I mean, you wonder whether they just either had in the teeth Geordie or they bring Mackenzie in from the start. You know, they've got options. Well,
just a reminder, get in touch with any more of those comments. That's contender for the comment of the week, and we'll have a host more throughout the week. Lots of great prizes to give away, but thanks to Heineken. This week we have a rugby ball signed by Brian O'Driscoll, Keith Wood and some other rugby legends, as well as a case of off the ball branded Heineken. That's our lot here for Monday Night Rugby. Thanks to Eddie, who was just on the line with us there, and Rory O'Connor from the Irish Independent. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks.
Monday Night Rugby on Off the Ball
with Eir Sport. Watch live Pro 14 action on Eir Sport this season. Visit eirsport.ie.